Today, we enter the shadowy, gaslit underworld of 19th century Paris, a city of glittering boulevards and starving alleys, of salons and slums, of glittering fashion and grinding poverty. In that world of stark contrasts, one man walked both sides of the line, Eugène Vidocq. He was a criminal, an escape artist, a masquerader, and, improbably, the architect of modern detective work. His life is the story of a man who knew the mind of crime so well he could reverse it, turning the tools of thieves into the instruments of justice. Grab your coffee. We are decoding the astonishing double life of the man who literally wrote the blueprint for modern policing by living the underworld from the inside out. Vidocq's early years read like a picaresque tale. Born in 1775, he cut an errant path through youth and early adulthood. He fought in the chaotic theaters of the French Revolutionary Wars, learned to sword fight and to survive by wit, and drifted into petty theft, smuggling, and a host of escalating crimes. He delighted in disguise. He delighted in escaping. French prisons like Bicêtre and La Force became stops on a route he understood and exploited. Time and again he slipped the noose, posing as guards, priests, and women, moving through crowds while officials drew blanks on his whereabouts. With each successful escape, his legend grew, and so did the notoriety that made him both feared by the authorities and admired in the shadows. By 1809, however, the endless fugitive life had taken its toll. Weariness, the constant threat of execution, and perhaps a dawning recognition of his unique skills pushed Vidocq to an extraordinary bargain. He offered himself to the police, surrender in return for clemency, and use his intimate knowledge of the criminal world to betray it. The offer was audacious. The police were skeptical, but they were also impotent, overwhelmed by a city that bred new schemes by the hour. They accepted. What followed was a transformation that reads like a plot twist in a thriller. Vidocq entered prison one last time, not as a captive, but as a spy. He cultivated contacts, extracted secrets, and used his underworld credibility to deliver information the police needed. Arrests followed, networks unraveled, the intangible became tangible. Stolen goods, ledgers, names the scaffolding of criminal enterprise exposed. Success bred confidence. In 1811, Vidocq was secretly freed and given a new commission to lead a small, experimental unit of plainclothes agents. By 1812, that unit became official, the Sûreté nationale, marking the birth of the modern detective bureau. It was revolutionary not because of technology, but because of method. Men without uniforms, skilled in surveillance, subterfuge, and infiltration, dedicated to investigating crime rather than merely reacting to it. The foundation of the Sûreté was scandalous. Vidocq recruited from the very class of men he had once led, ex-convicts, reformed pickpockets, men who spoke the language and frequented the haunts of thieves. The elite of Paris recoiled. How could a police force be entrusted to men with turned collars and criminal pasts? How could justice be administered by those whose hands had known the same acts they were now sworn to suppress? Vidocq's answer was simple and brutal. It takes a thief to catch a thief. He placed former offenders where they could be most effective, embedded in the dens of vice, trusted by the underworld, and able to pass as one of them. The Sûreté's detectives were experts in disguise, in reading the smallest social cues, in developing informant networks, and in the patient art of entrapment. The results were immediate. Crime that had seemed invisible to the uniformed constable suddenly produced leads, arrests, and recoveries. But the revolution did not stop there. Vidocq was an organizer and cataloger. He turned chaos into record. He created one of the first systematic indices of criminals, noting aliases, methods, peculiarities, and previous offenses. He pioneered the plaster cast for footprints, a simple but brilliant method for connecting a suspect to a crime scene. He pushed for the study of modus operandi, the idea that criminals repeat patterns and use those patterns to anticipate moves and link crimes across districts. He helped establish early principles of ballistics and forensic comparison long before those phrases existed in police manuals. In short, he transformed anecdote into procedure, improvisation into technique. For a time, Vidocq was unstoppable. The Sûreté's clearance rates soared. The city breathed a little easier, but success brought enemies. The old guard uniformed police, magistrates, and politicians resented a former convict running a key arm of public safety. Critics accused him of turning the police into a band of rogues. Political pressure mounted. Vidocq's methods, effective as they were, offended sensibilities and invited scandal. The very men who had once celebrated his results began to demand his removal. In 1827, that pressure finally broke him. Vidocq resigned under a cloud of controversy, yet retreat was only outward. He immediately reinvented himself again, opening the Bureau of Universal Information, effectively the world's first private detective agency. There he marketed the same mix of skills, infiltration, surveillance, and confidential inquiry to private clients, insurers, and businesses. He turned industrial espionage and fraud detection into paid crafts, a precursor of the security and investigative industries that would follow. Vidocq's life did not belong only to police files. It flowed into letters and novels. He became a living prototype for fictional detectives who would change literature. Victor Hugo drew on Vidocq's career in crafting Inspector Javert, a figure whose moral certainty and dogged pursuit owe something to the complex, driven man who had once been Paris's most notorious fugitive. Edgar Allan Poe's Sea. Auguste Dupin, the analytical, observational sleuth who breathed rational order into mystery, and the later, more famous Sherlock Holmes would inherit traits traceable to Vidocq's empirical methods and his careful indexing of criminal behavior. Charles Dickens, too, drew on the milieu Vidocq exposed, mining the underworld and its characters in his explorations of Victorian society. Yet Vidocq's story is not a straightforward redemption tale. It is messy, morally ambiguous, and perpetually suspect. Did he truly reform? Or was his career as chief of the Sûreté the most ingenious form of control, a way to harness and manipulate the underworld he once led? Critics accused him of continuing influence over his old associates, of using informants for personal gain, and of exploiting knowledge of crime for power. Defenders point to arrests, recovered loot, and safer streets. Both readings are plausible. Vidocq probably contained multitudes. A man who loved disguise, who loved agency, and who needed the thrill of the chase even when on the side of the law. Whatever the moral judgment, the institutional legacy is incontestable. Vidocq's innovations, undercover work, record-keeping, forensic casts, and the operational philosophy of know your criminal are the cornerstones of modern policing. The idea that detectives should think like criminals in order to catch them is now orthodoxy. His private agency foreshadowed the global industry of private investigation. His life fed literature, and literature fed public imagination, making the detective archetype a central figure in modern culture. Eugène Vidocq's extraordinary double life, from France's most notorious escape artist to the founder of the Sûreté, is the origin story of modern detection. He taught the world to see crime not only as a set of acts, but as a social network, a language, and a psychology that could be read, mapped, and ultimately disrupted. Do you think Vidocq was truly reformed? Or was the Sûreté a grand, sustained experiment in controlling the underworld by placing one of its own at the helm? Keep questioning everything.